Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Sports talk where your voice counts. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. That's one thing about Penn State basketball. I just want to do a very quick note. There's no question in the 37 seasons I've done this that he has done a better job, Patrick Chambers, of bringing in a higher level of talent than at any point. Now, I've always felt that Penn State has needed to somehow transition itself to being the older team on a more consistent basis, and I think that's been important. And there was, obviously, for this particular year, part of the train went off the tracks because they were on the path to being one of the older teams. And then Tony Carr ended up developing to the point where he ended up being drafted by New Orleans in the second round and left after his sophomore year. And when Tony was recruited, I honestly thought, in my evaluation of him, that he was going to be a 4-year player, a really good 4-year player. Like Lamar Stevens is a really good 4-year player. I thought that was Tony. So I didn't expect him to get drafted. I didn't expect him to go into the draft. Now, last January, I changed my mind because suddenly I started realizing, A, he's doing really well, but B, there also was a lot of interest in him being drafted, and also there was a lot of family pressure about entering the draft. So last January, I pretty much knew that it was going to be it for him at Penn State, which is not what I expected when he verbally committed in August a couple of years earlier. I didn't expect that. I thought this was going to be a really good 4-year player. You see Carson Edwards back this year with Purdue. You see Anthony Cowan back with Maryland. Thought Tony was a 6'4" version of players like that are really good college players. But crossing that threshold to being a draftable NBA player, wasn't sure he'd get there. He did, to his credit. It changes a lot of things. Where now, when you're thinking in cycles of 3-4 years, and football coaches have to be the same way now. They have to think in cycles of 3-4 years. It's hard to think that way anymore with all the transition that takes place. And it does make a difference in terms of what you're trying to build, because you really can limit the number of plans that you have. All right. Time now for our play-by-play call of the day.
Jones defending, 10 to shoot. Cunningham trying to drive on Zion to McMahon. Cutting, reverse layup, blocked by Zion. They fight for the rebound, and Jones has it for Duke. A chance to tie with a 3. Barrett between the legs to Reddish to tie. Bang!
And how long was that three-point shot? Several feet beyond the arc at 69 all.
Wara inbounds for Cunningham. Racing up the right, guarded by Goldwire. Down to 10 and 9. 8 and 7. Off of a screen, it's Cunningham. Gets inside, behind the back. Fade away, jumper, no good. Zion fights for the rebound. He's got it, and that'll do it. The Blue Devils roar back from 23 down to win at Louisville 71-69.
They're down 23 with, 9.5 to play, 9:43 to play, and won. Yeah, that's a great win. Great win last night for Duke to go on the road and do that. Okay. Yesterday we talked with Ben Kercheval on the show. I said, hey, can you come back? Because there's more questions I have about the Alliance. And it's interesting how the Alliance is getting more and more publicity each day. In fact, the L.A. Chargers general manager today says he sees the potential for the AAF as a developmental league for the NFL. I totally agree with that assessment. So let's bring Ben back and talk about some of the rules that they have in the AAF. What are, you and I both know, established leagues end up moving in a direction because there are other leagues that make them say, maybe we ought to try that. What are a couple of items you've seen from the AAF just in a weekend that says, you know what, that would work in the NFL?
That's a great question, because I'll give you the one that I think it could happen, but which is, I think at some point kickoffs are done. And that's the AAF does that for player safety, and certainly that's a thing. But they also do it because they have determined, based on the feedback that they get, that it is the most boring play in football, statistically speaking. And again, their job is to fit this thing in 2.5 hours.
Yep.
So boring play, not good for player safety. Get rid of it, right? I mean, it's dead weight. So I think at some point that is the one thing that could make its way into other branches of football. Here's the thing, though. One, the NFL, and this is what I think prevents so many. People look at the AAF and go, well, these rules should be adopted here. First of all, the NFL really cares about what people think about the NFL.
Yes.
Like that, they are very buttoned up, very non-transparent, very about their perception. And so their answer is not to get rid of things. Their answer is, hey, you keep your head up when you tackle when you're 9 years old. That's their solution to this, right? And then on top of that, special teams is a way for guys to make the roster. I mean, so they assign a value to what kickoffs mean to the game. Plus, when I talked to Charlie Ebersol in San Antonio, he threw out this number. I forget if it's 72 or 74. It's sort of semantics at this point. But there are 72 units, commercials, for an NFL game. Right. Kick off the ball, go to commercial, come back. So that is advertising space that they get to sell. Whereas in the AAF, you're trying to move things along. You'll recall the other thing is they don't have television timeouts.
Right.
So they're saying is, if you look at a melt of a football game, it's 18 minutes long, right? I mean, the actual play of a game is 18 minutes long. So they say, let's just cut down on all the excess time that we have, whereas the NFL is like, hey, can we fit another commercial in here? And so, I mean, they look at it from the completely opposite end. The other thing is, I talked to Mike Piera yesterday for about 20 minutes, because I'm working on another thing where the MVP of Week 1, Steve, was the instant replay, the Sky Judge, where they mic'd him up, and they walked you through what was happening and why they were going to make the call that they were going to make on the field. And I said, well, would the NFL do this, especially in the wake of New Orleans and Los Angeles, where the call was missed?
Yeah.
And you got what, was anyone accountable for this? The head judge goes to the pool reporters afterwards. He's like, oh yeah, I didn't see the play. And everyone's like, are you what? And so everyone's freaking out about this. And in sort of response to that, the AAF goes, you know what? We're actually going to peel the curtain back, and we're going to show it to you. Thing is, logistically, it's far easier to do that for 4 games, one at a time, than it is if you have the head office in New York, where the officials there are trying to go over replays for, with all the 1 o'clock games, right? It's just logistically, it's a lot harder to do. So I used to think that the NFL, I say used to, this was 2 days ago. I thought the last week has been a freaking blur, man. I thought previously that this might be something the NFL would look at. After speaking with Mike, I don't quite get that impression. Yeah. Either way, even though there's this connection between the AAF and the NFL, it does not necessarily mean the NFL would adopt anything that the AAF does. Now, they'll look at stuff because you're always trying to look at stuff. I mean, you go back to the original XFL, you wouldn't have a Skycam now if it wasn't for the XFL. So there are things that they will look at, but I don't know necessarily if they will adopt any of those items.
Well, you wouldn't have a challenge flag without the USFL. Right. I mean, that's why I say that's why I've said that it's interesting how other leagues. I mean, look, why are 18-year-olds drafted in the NHL? Because the WHA signed Wayne Gretzky at 17. So that's how they make the move. But one thing that didn't come into play was the 4th and 12 from the 28-yard line.
Yeah.
Instead of an onside kick. How interested are you to see that situation come up so you can draw some conclusions about it?
Fascinated. I was kind of hoping we'd get it because we didn't get Saturday. I was really hoping we'd get it on Sunday.
I thought Salt Lake would do it against Arizona. And they didn't after they'd scored.
I thought so too, and they didn't. And the other thing too is, I'm not saying winning doesn't matter at the AAF. That's clearly not true. Everyone wants to win. There's a playoffs. There's a championship game, but they also know what they're about, and they just game sort of out of reach. Who just put the backups in and sort of just kind of let it go. It's week one. We're still trying to kind of get things going. But at some point, you work on it in practice, right? So at some point, you've got to bring it out for a game. So I would imagine that we'll probably see it in earnest. But I think the onside kick replacement is really fascinating. I'm also anxious to see overtime because it more resembles college than the NFL. You get the ball at the 10-yard line. And you get one. It's only one overtime.
Right.
It's not. You can end in a tie.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Those are the two things we haven't seen, so they're the two things I want to see.
Yeah, I want to see those as well. What about 2-point conversions after every touchdown?
Love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the NFL tried to move it back to make it more interesting, and kind of.
Yeah, but it's right there. But it's with the kickoff. I mean, it's still one of those it takes up space in the game, and again, then you have a commercial afterward. Look, just so everybody knows, why was the 2-minute warning created? 2-minute warning was created decades ago for commercials. That's the only reason it was created. Okay, so
yeah. So I like what they're doing as far as moving the game along. Again, it's 150 minutes. Can we pack this thing in to 150? And going back to the Sky Judge and sort of broadcasting the mic'd up conversation that they're having, I hadn't thought about it this way either, but Mike brought it up as a point. It was a good point. Was it keeps you engaged in the flow of the game.
Right.
Otherwise, it used to be that a guy would just the ref would go under a tent, and he'd come out 10 minutes later like he talked to a freaking oracle or something. and you'd go, so in the meantime, you're sitting there with two announcers who don't know any more than you do, going
right.
well, I think his knee was down, but I'm not sure, at least now. And you're sort of disengaged from what's happening. The only way you can find out for sure what's going to happen is if Tony Romo's called the play.
Exactly.
And at least now you can hear what's going on, and you are more connected to that aspect of the game than you've ever been. So they've maintained that attention.
You'll love this. At Beaver Stadium when Penn State's playing and they're reviewing a play, obviously we have a monitor in the booth. The fans will look at Jack Ham and me, and they'll turn around thumbs up, thumbs down. Like that. That's just great.
Do you have an open air? Do you have an open air press?
We have an open air. Yeah.
An open air. Okay. Yeah. That'll do it.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. One time we didn't get it right, but they didn't get it right. The ball skipped off the turf. We could see it, so we went thumbs down, and they said, "No, the play stands." They looked at us like we're idiots. Look, if you saw what we saw, okay. One final question, and this is going to be this is not a crystal ball question, but just of interest. They go out, the ratings, opening week, CBS can't be happier. 2.1, NBA goes 2.0, 2.1, right around there with Oklahoma City and Westbrook and Harden and Houston. How interested are you going to now be yourself as a reporter in sustainability of those ratings to see if they can still stay in that neighborhood?
Interested, but I also know that they're not going to be like that. I mean, you had primetime simultaneous regional broadcasts for the first two games on CBS on a cable channel.
Right.
So you're not going to get that moving forward. I mean, CBS Sports Network will broadcast the Sunday game. NFL Network gets a couple of games. Bleacher Report Live streams one, and the thing is if you're Memphis and you're not very good, and you get a couple BR Live streams going, you're like, okay, that sort of falls off pretty quickly. So there are certainly aspects that could have the ratings go down. So I don't expect them to necessarily hold that number. And people made a big deal out of the fact that the AAF beat the NBA. And I get that it was a big game. It was a Saturday night game with Harden and all that stuff. Like, I understand that.
Yeah.
NBA is a long season, man.
Oh.
I mean, it is a brutally long season, and the AAF was novel and it was different. And you know what happened? Most of the country saw in the first 5 minutes Sean Washington take Mike Berkovici's freaking head off.
Right.
And it was a viral moment, and that was huge for the surge of interest in it. You're not always going to get that moving forward. So, but I think to keep this thing moving along, and again, having the NFL at your side helps, but you still have to be able to draw interest. You have to be able to maintain that through the course of the season. I expect the ratings to drop. I think that's absolutely natural.
Right, curiosity factor's over.
Right. So, but of course, in my own transparency, I work for CBS Sports. I absolutely have a vested interest in this thing succeeding as well. I want it to succeed. I think there are numerous stories to be told about the players and the coaches and the team. So from a coverage standpoint, I like it. I want it to keep going. I agree with your assessment earlier that I think there are some smart people in the room who can make decisions that are both well thought out but executed with a sense of urgency and quickness. So I think it has a good chance to survive, but you have to have a product on the field that people like, and at the end of the day, having it in 2.5 hours that people can digest it and move on, and you're not taking yourself too seriously and you're not trying to be something that you're not. I think those are all factors in whether this thing comes back.
This was fascinating. I know, and you've gone through a whirlwind, and you digested all of it as if you had 2 weeks to digest it. Ben, thanks.
I did. A month ago, I got the assignment, and I said, "All right, let's do it."
It's been unbelievable.
It's been a learning experience on a lot of fronts, but I tell you, no one else has really been on this, and so it was an opportunity to go in and just absorb, and it's been fascinating. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, I tell you, it's a hell of a section on your resume, man. I mean, it's just like it's something that you can talk. I mean, we talked about it for 39 minutes, almost 40 minutes, and we could keep going. I mean, it's been an absolute blast.
Well, hopefully we'll do this again maybe in a few weeks, because I think it would be great to follow up. Yeah.
Well, call anytime, Steve. I always love coming on.
Ben, thanks so much. To say that was great would be an understatement. Thank you.
Yeah, all right, thanks, guys. Take care.
Okay. Great to have you, Ben, on the show. That was awesome. James Sanders has a question, so I will come back. We'll answer that in a moment as we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Cupid's arrow has hit the bullseye. Cupid has hit the sign in front of Sunbury Motors Kia. Drive by and you'll believe in love at first sight, too. Lease a new Kia for under $200 a month. Fall in love with this deal at Sunbury Motors Kia. Lease a 2019 Kia Forte LXS for just $196.40 a month for 39 months. But that's not all. During the Kia President's Day sales event, a 2019 Kia Sportage LX is priced at just $247.94 a month. And a 2019 Kia Niro LX starts at only $255.13 a month. Both for 39 months. All new Kias come with an industry-leading 10-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty. Cupid hit the bullseye of savings at Sunbury Motors Kia. Routes 1115 in Hummel's Wharf. Leases are 39 months, 10,000 miles per year, $2,000 due at signing. No security deposit required. Tax and tags included. Offers expire 2/28/19. Warranty is a limited powertrain warranty. For details, see retailer or go to kia.com.
Neal Coolong next half hour. Let's get to Jim in Mifflinburg. Missed most of the first hour. Jeez, Jim, come on. You missed maybe the best hour we've ever done in the 8th season of the show. I can't believe you missed it. Some questions were taken and answered, so I don't know if this may have been addressed. Why is it that Big Ten member Iowa does not wrestle Penn State, Ohio State, or Michigan? Shouldn't the best be competing with the best for the good of the sport? First of all, your last sentence is absolutely correct. I'm with you, Jim, all the way on that. Technically, you want to know the technical answer for it?
Well, the technical answer is this. When you wrestle 9 conference dual meets, and Penn State still has to wrestle Michigan State and Illinois. They got Michigan State this weekend, then Illinois. You only wrestle 9. That means 4 teams rotate off your schedule. And it just turns out that for Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State, there are 3 of the 4 teams that have rotated off of Iowa's schedule, just like, for example, Minnesota and Iowa aren't on Penn State's schedule. It's just part of the rotation. Now, to the second part, I've explained the Big Ten part of it. Now to your other part. You are absolutely correct, Jim. For the good of the sport, they should be wrestling each other. But you know what's interesting about Iowa? Iowa's not big on doing what's good for the sport. They're only big on doing what's good for Iowa in wrestling. Cale Sanderson's always looking at the big picture, and he's the one that is always trying to take care of the sport overall.
Taking your calls at 800-795-9565. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. Now, from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf. Always deal with the best. That's Sunbury Motors. Great product, great sales staff, great service department. All right. Going to get to football in a moment with Neal Coolong. Just very quickly. Obviously, a big win for Penn State last night. All that hard work, validation, they finally get it. And beating Michigan 74-69. They've won 2 of their last 3 games. They're at Purdue Saturday at 4 on, beginning at 3:30. Is Shikellamy tonight, Sean?
Hoops are finished.
Actually, they're playing games. The announcer's finished.
Okay. No, they are finished.
They're done, huh?
Season is over, yes. Wrapped it up Monday night.
February 13th. Ooh, early.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's bring in Neal Coolong. Let's talk about the NFL. You know, your guy, Sean, Antonio Brown, he's your guy. He's your guy. Demands now to be traded.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Well, maybe my guy for another month.
Everybody acts like he demanded to be traded. They have to do something. You don't have to do anything. He's got 3 years left in this contract. You don't want to trade him? You don't have to trade him. Neal Coolong joins us. Neal, welcome back.
Hey, how you guys doing?
You want to steal that line, don't you, Neal?
Never heard it before. Never comes up.
The same approach to trial that he took for practice of the Bengals, a no-show. Found guilty in abstention. All right.
And you know what, too? It's not even the most newsworthy thing he did this week. You know, that's just how bizarre this whole thing has gotten. And certainly, you know, by and large, a guy doesn't show up for, you know, a trial that he's absolutely not going to be able to get out of anyway. I could understand the diva in him that might choose that route, but then the action he takes is to tell his fan base that he's not going to play in Pittsburgh anymore.
Thank you, Steeler Nation, for a big 9 years. Time to move on and forward is what he wrote. So your reaction to what you knew, that's one I think all of us expected, that he would do that.
I kind of thought I wasn't really sure which direction it was all going to go. I expected to eventually hear something from Antonio Brown, whether it be something that, you know, he's putting stuff behind him and wants to focus on the team, or if it's, you know, I want to get out of here. I expected to hear something from him. I wouldn't say it was a illusion in my mind that he was going to want to get out of Pittsburgh. I'm not even 100% sure the Steelers want him to leave. You know, let's keep in mind, Antonio Brown doesn't have any say over whether or not he gets traded. It's going to be now extremely difficult for the Steelers to get back anything close to value on him, just because if he's publicly going out to say that he doesn't want to play here anymore, no one's going to give up anything for him. They'll just wait for him to get released and sign him to their own contract. Not have to take on the one that he has now, which isn't a bad one.
Right.
It might be his most tradable aspect. Just $2.5 million he's owed in mid-March, and otherwise no guaranteed money and pretty low salaries for the types of numbers that he puts up. So the situation, I think, goes a lot deeper than what we know about. I think there's more that will come out about this as it all continues to kind of swirl around. I'm not sure what the Steelers could get for Antonio Brown at this point, but I do think there really isn't a whole lot else they're going to be able to do. They're going to have to figure out some type of way to move on from him.
But here's another part, though, to this. Let's take this from a completely different direction, because he still has 3 years remaining on that 4-year deal, which was $68 million. I mean, he still has 3 years left in the extension that he signed with Pittsburgh. What's to keep the Steelers from saying, you're under contract, we're going to keep you. Show up, don't show up. You don't show up, you're not going to get paid, but we're not going to move you.
I don't think there really is anything at this point. That's kind of what I mean. I'm not 100% sure the Steelers want to move him
right
for anything less than a pretty knockout deal. They're on the hook for Antonio Brown against the salary cap, whether they pay him or not.
That's right.
They're going to have to account for a large amount more money than a team that would acquire him any other way will. So from that perspective, I'm not sure exactly what their motivation is to trade him unless they get exactly what they want.
Yeah,
so
a first-round pick.
I don't think Brown has the leverage that he thinks that he does. I'm sure Drew Rosenhaus's agent knows that. I don't think any team wants to keep a player that really doesn't want to be there. And if he's going to continue to create a toxic environment, that's something I guess they'll have to kind of figure out. But they're not going to move him just because he wants to go. Something else I think will have to come out from the Steelers to make all of this work anyway. And I'm not entirely sure what they could get for him. But I don't think they're just going to trade him for the sake of trading him just because Antonio Brown said he wants to go.
I agree with you. I think 6 months from now they start training camp. I'm not shocked if he's that he's still on the roster. Now, whether he shows up or not is his business. But unless they get exactly what they want, they've already got him under contract. Okay? Even if they cut him after June 1st, there's still $10 million in dead money. I mean, it doesn't benefit them in any way.
Yeah, and that's exactly the issue. And I'm not sure what Brown's position on that would be, what type of stance he would want to have. Whether it's on the cap or it's dead, it's there. It's tethered. It's not going anywhere.
That's right.
So the Steelers have essentially already paid. With that, he will figure to be a large part of their salary cap equation, whether he plays down or not. So it's difficult because I think multiple sides have different positions of leverage in all of this, and none of it spells the kind of return on investment I would think the Steelers would want if they were going to be basically forced by Antonio Brown to trade him somewhere else. You cut out half the league because they're probably not going to do it within the AFC anyway, unless it's the situation gets really bad. I don't know. His contract, I think, is large enough and long enough to think. I don't necessarily think they didn't expect Le'Veon Bell to play last year either, but obviously they were okay with taking on that risk. Look where that ended up. So maybe they just stand pat. Maybe they don't move. That'd be crazy. Absolutely nuts to have the last seasons of both Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown be seasons in which they didn't play at all for him. That's just nuts. As the Steelers' world turns.
And as the Cleveland Browns' world turns, Kareem Hunt. This league, ever since the Ray Rice situation a few years ago, has been, up on the ropes, reeling on this issue. And the Browns go out and they sign. Now, I realize that there's still hurdles to clear here, but they signed him. Just in terms of a look, it's not a good look, Neal.
I think the situation with Hunt versus Rice, I'll choose my words carefully, but I think objectively, I think you can gain a little bit more from Hunt in the situation that he faced versus Rice's action. Along with that, I mean, even with that said, my honest-to-God thought is, like, I want to be Kareem Hunt's agent because the deal that he just signed with the Browns, considering it's a one-year contract, right, no guaranteed money, he gets something for a workout bonus, and he's a restricted free agent in 2020.
Yep.
The Browns own him for nothing for 2 years, and he just actively signed that contract. I mean, I don't think anybody would let him get away with, profiting from having the
sure.
Dorsey knows that. It's just bad optics. He can't really do for him something that's going to make him look like he, benefited
right.
from the entire situation. All of that said, you pretty much have to guarantee a 6-game suspension for him, even though he was already on the commissioner's exempt list. He couldn't be signed. He couldn't play. Some will argue that counts as something of a suspension, but it's like he's signing for nothing, even close to his market value. And he isn't able to get anything next year when he's a restricted free agent. So the Browns are picking up for absolutely nothing one of the most dynamic offensive players in the game. Yes, certainly that's going to come with, it's going to come with the type of problem that Dorsey oftentimes isn't afraid of. Let's keep in mind he signed Tyreek Hill,
yes.
Back when he was with Kansas City.
Yes.
He obviously still has something of a relationship with Hunt as it is anyway. He's not afraid to take on that bad look. And the reality is the Browns are the ones that are profiting on this to a huge degree. It's just hard for me to think that an agent wouldn't be able to get a second year on that contract, knowing that restricted free agency is coming up, knowing that he can get in front of the market right now, sign wherever he wants, whoever it is that would want him, and then do the typical song and dance that they're going to do. Everyone's going to issue a statement. He's going to say that he went to classes and it's not really who he is and all that stuff. Whether or not that's true, I'm not trying to belittle the point of emphasis that he's trying to establish with himself. What he did was wrong. What he did was bad. I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
Right.
But this is straight out of the playbook. Everybody knows this is coming. I would have thought he could have gotten a better deal than right. what I've seen reported that he signed with Cleveland.
Now, the AAF started over the weekend, and you probably watched a little bit of it. But I want to get into something that's a little bit different, and that's the XFL, which is a year from now. Now, the AAF is going to stick by what the NFL Players Association negotiated with the NFL owners, and that means you have to be out of school 3 years, out of high school 3 years before you're eligible for the NFL draft. So you can be a junior or a redshirt sophomore. The XFL says they won't stick with that, that they're going to go. That's why the first guy you think of is Trevor Lawrence. What do you think of that possibility, and what could that do for the NFL if somebody of note were to accept even a 1 or 2 year deal with the XFL next year? That's an underclassman.
Yeah, from the XFL's perspective, I think they don't have a choice. They kind of have to not follow that rule. If they've already got a competitor that's going to follow it along with the NFL from a business perspective, they have no reason to follow it. I think there absolutely is a market if you want to bring in a guy like Lawrence. Let's just say that it's him.
Right. I mean,
they're going to have to find a way to pay him.
Right. You're picking the guy that's the opposite. But you know what? This is Vince McMahon. The way to pay him, I do know this for a fact because I talked to somebody that was associated with the league in 2001. Every single person in the XFL in 2001 got paid in full.
Yeah. It's just a question of how much any team or even the league itself would be able to pony up for a player like that. Because
right.
if you're Trevor Lawrence, the main thing that you need to look at really is exposure at this point. If he can't enter the draft, he almost is better off playing next year and then taking his junior year off completely. I mean, really, you look at his ceiling, where he can go, where he is now as a teenager. The kid's going to be pretty good. I think he's got a pretty good shot at making it in the NFL. I think that's something most people could agree upon. If you're going to go to the XFL, I would imagine your primary argument to that would be getting paid in cash that you actually are allowed to have and not have it to hide it or whatever it is that top college players are able to do just through alumni now. How much money would that be? And do you think you're going to continue to improve with the coaching, with the level of talent that you are surrounded by in the XFL? Is all of that going to be more than the top Division I program? I don't know what the exact answer to that, but they're going to have to pay him more than $50,000 a year for him to make it worth his time.
Exactly,
they're going to have to give him a couple million.
Oh, he's going to. No, he would get. In fact, he might get more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's for the sake of the XFL. If the XFL wanted to make a splash, and I'm pulling a lot of this out of the USFL's playbook back in the Donald Trump days, they had to outbid prospects. They had to figure out how to make enough money to pay the top-end guys to make their league work, and it did for the most part. There were flaws with it and everything, but overall, they were able to attract top-end talent by paying them, and that was in a system where they didn't need to worry about getting the 18, 19, 20-year-old guys. These were college seniors, by and large, guys that played 4 years of college back in the early 80s. They obviously don't really do that now, but the only thing preventing Trevor Lawrence from being the top pick in this year's draft is that rule, and the only reason that rule exists is the combination of the NFL making sure that the colleges still have players available to make their product, and they don't have to spend as much money on scouting like they would. They have to go back into high school to scout guys if they could go at whatever point they could enter the draft. They could get them after their freshman year of college. They could get them when they're seniors in high school. It's a lot of money and a lot of development time that would have to go into it. So the rule itself is there for business reasons, not competitive reasons.
Oh, believe me. Why is there one and done in college? Because the NBA does not want to scout AAU in high school games.
Yeah.
That's why one and done exists, because they don't want to send their scouts to waste their time in a high school gym.
Really is the only reason that type of system exists, because then what they're going to do is look at baseball. Look at the amount of money that they have to put into scouting internationally.
Oh my!
And they build their entire towns to do nothing but bring in players from whatever city, whatever country it is that they're doing it with, and they have to do this across the globe. And there is no draft, largely just because they can find their own future players. It's not stuff that they can do with the rules that apply in basketball and in football. They have to keep that cost, that expectation down. The NCAA, conversely, profits on the fact that these guys will all come in and they'll gladly cooperate with the scouts and to make sure that everyone's watching their product because they have the best players for that particular age group. If you took that away from football, I mean, I'm not sure what you'd even have with the NFL, but their resources would increase by a factor of like 50 for everything that they would need to do.
If your goal is to be a $25 billion business by 2027, which is what they've said, and now they're up to $15 billion. I mean, they may get there sooner rather than later to $25 billion. You don't blow money on changing a system that allows you to be on the path to $25 billion and suddenly stalls you.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, they aren't going to mess around. Plus, I mean, it's just, you think of it just purely from that competitive perspective. You put a 26-year-old, a high-end NFL player who's been in an NFL weight and nutrition program for the last 5 years
against a 19-year-old,
learning how to play the game, and then you put a 19-year-old out there, the kid's going to get killed. Literally killed. You couldn't do it. There's way too much physical maturation that has to take place at that college level. They have to get bigger, they have to get stronger, and they're not going to do that. Just they haven't had, they haven't lifted 5 years worth of weight. Exactly. And when they go up against a 31-year-old man who's been doing it for a decade, it's not even competitive. It's just dangerous.
Of course it is.
And then on top of it all, they don't want to have to pay the 18-year-old. They want to have to pay the scouts to go digging through high school film all over, anywhere across the country. It's just, financially, none of it works.
And by being in college for 3 years, you're not getting somebody raw.
Yep.
It's just college coaching, college strength and conditioning, college speed programs. And the teaching part, right? The NFL benefits tremendously on what, especially Power 5 football does to get these guys ready. So,
yeah, you put all of that in. It's a huge part of. Take like the Senior Bowl, for example. That's a big part of the reason why teams really kind of hang their hat on the Senior Bowl, because you get the oldest guys together. These are the ones that are, logically, they're the most physically mature and ready to play at that level. It doesn't mean, obviously, there aren't a ton of good prospects who aren't, seniors, but they need that extra time in development. They want to be able to get players who have lifted those additional weights, who have been under the instruction of their coaches for a lot longer. It's a hard game, and there really are not a whole lot of reps around, and that you don't get to play a whole lot of snaps, even at the collegiate level, before you get into the NFL. You think of it, some of these guys, take like Juju Smith-Schuster, for example. Yep. He was 20 when he was drafted. He's probably played less than 100 games of football in his life before he got to the NFL.
Right.
That isn't a whole lot. It really is it speaks to the rawness of some prospects and how they get better the older that they get, simply because they just didn't play very much. And even in college, it's a big-time commitment, but they have rules against the amount of time that you can spend with your coaches. They're not getting it, 24/7 the way they will in the NFL.
Neal, great, as always. Thanks so much.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, guys. We'll talk to you.
Neal Coolong, USA Today. All right. Don't forget, Patrick Chambers is going to join us on the show on Friday. Ben Jones, Steakhouse.com on Friday. Chris Mack on Baseball Friday. We got a lot going on in tomorrow's show as well. We're looking forward to it. And more emails where they say they love Sean, but there's just this confusing one. Don't make fun of the suit. He's awesome. K-Her from Danville. Okay. All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
You're listening to News Radio 1070 WKOK Sunbury. You can hear us anywhere in the world with the Sunbury Broadcasting Corporation app.